4 distant explosions. Anthony Castellano knew that sound the way a musician knows a wrong note. 81 mm mortars, German, firing at him, flight time 12 seconds. He was 40 feet above the frozen ground, lashed to an oak tree with parachute cord. His hands gripped a rifle that had just killed its 67th man in 52 hours. Below him, a logging road carved through the Ardennes forest like a wound. The road where he had transformed from soldier into something else. Something the Germans were now calling Der Waldgeist, the forest spirit. 12 seconds. Tony closed his eyes, not in prayer, in calculation. The mortars had launched from approximately 800 yards north. 4 tubes meant 4 rounds. The Germans had been walking their fire toward his position all morning, adjusting after each salvo. First volley had landed 40 yards short, second volley 20 yards short. The arithmetic said the third volley would find him. 11 seconds. His mother's face appeared in his mind. Maria Castellano, hands scarred from sewing needles, making Sunday gravy in their Brooklyn kitchen. She had cried when he enlisted, not the theatrical crying of the women in Italian movies, but the silent kind, the dangerous kind, the kind that said she knew something he didn't. 10 seconds. His father Giuseppe's last words before Tony shipped out, "You come back, you understand me, you come back." 9 seconds. The rope dug into his ribs. If the shrapnel didn't kill him instantly, he would hang here bleeding until shock or cold finished the job. The squad was 60 yards away. Too far. They couldn't reach him in time, even if Sergeant O'Brien tried. 8 seconds. He thought of the Germans he had killed, not as a mass, but as individuals. The one who had been smoking a cigarette when Tony's bullet found him. The officer with the wedding ring catching morning light. The boy who looked maybe 17, who had tried to run, who almost made it. 7 seconds. Tony had violated every rule they taught him at sniper school. The 3-shot maximum from any position. Shoot and relocate. Mobility equals survival. Static sniper equals dead sniper. He had known the rules, had memorized them, had watched 2 other snipers die for breaking them. 6 seconds, and yet here he was, 40 feet up, nearly 3 days into a mission that should have lasted 90 seconds. 67 German soldiers would never go home because of him. Their supply route was a graveyard. Their offensive had stalled in this sector. 5 seconds. Was it worth it? The question arrived without answer. 1 American life traded for 67 German lives, plus the uncounted Americans who would survive because the German advance had been delayed. Cold arithmetic of war. 4 seconds. But that arithmetic didn't account for the weight. Each kill added something. Not guilt exactly. Weight. Like stones in a pocket. 67 stones now. Each one with a face he would remember until the day he died. 3 seconds. Which might be now. 2 seconds. 1 second. The mortars hit. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. This story begins earlier. It begins on a rooftop in Brooklyn with a 12-year-old boy and a borrowed rifle learning patience from pigeons. It begins with a lesson about stillness that would save his life and cost others theirs. It begins the way most extraordinary things begin ordinary. Before Tony Castellano spent 3 days in a tree killing Germans, before he changed U.S. Army doctrine, before he became a ghost story told in SS divisions, he was just a kid from Red Hook who was good at waiting. Let me show you how a pigeon hunter became the deadliest sniper in the Ardennes. Subscribe if you want to hear stories they don't teach in history class. The ones about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. The ones where the cost is real and the heroes don't always feel heroic. This is one of those stories. The rooftop of the tenement on Sullivan Street smelled like tar and pigeon droppings. Tony Castellano lay motionless behind the brick lip of the roof edge, the Remington .22, resting on a folded towel. Below, 6 stories down the neighborhood conducted its business. Mrs. Giordano arguing with the fish vendor. The DeLoca brothers working on their truck. Kids playing stickball in the street. Up here, silence. The pigeons had landed on the opposite roof 40 minutes ago. Tony had been in position for 43 minutes. His legs had gone numb at the 20-minute mark. His back ached. A mosquito had bitten his neck, and he hadn't moved to scratch it. Because pigeons have excellent vision. Pigeons notice movement the way a jeweler notices a flaw in a diamond. Instantly, completely. His grandfather Salvatore had taught him this. The old man had been a hunter in Sicily before coming to America, before the docks, in the warehouse work, and the emphysema that would eventually kill him. Salvatore had given Tony the rifle on his 12th birthday, along with instructions delivered in heavily accented English. You want to shoot? First you learn to not shoot. You learn to wait. You learn stillness like stone. You think a stone gets tired. You think a stone gets bored. Be stone. So Tony became stone. The pigeons cooed and strutted. One of them, a fat male with iridescent neck feathers separated from the group, wandered toward the roof edge. Perfect target. Tony's finger found the trigger. Didn't pull. Waited. The pigeon pecked at something. Took 2 more steps. Now. The rifle made a sound like a whispered secret. The pigeon dropped. The others, startled, circled once, then settled. They hadn't seen the threat. As far as they knew, their companion had simply fallen asleep. Tony waited another 10 minutes before moving. Stone doesn't celebrate success immediately. Stone remains stone. He retrieved the bird, examined it. Clean headshot. His grandfather would approve. Mr. Castellucci at the restaurant would pay 15 cents for it. 15 cents helped. In 1936 in Red Hook, 15 cents meant something. But more than the money, more than the approval, Tony had learned something profound on that rooftop. He had learned that patience was a weapon, that stillness could be violent, that the one who moves last often wins. 8 years later in a Belgian forest, this lesson would mean everything. By 14, Tony could hit a tin can at 200 yards with iron sights. By 16, he knew wind drift and bullet drop, and how heat shimmer distorted distance at midday. He understood that cold air was denser than warm air, that it slowed bullets less, that a shot taken at dawn flew differently than a shot taken at noon. He learned alone. Other boys his age were joining street gangs or working the docks or trying to impress girls outside the candy store. Tony was on rooftops studying the physics of death at a distance. His mother worried, not about the shooting, but about the solitude. Antonio, she would say, using his full name, the way she did when concerned, you need friends, you need to be with people. But Tony was with people. He watched them from above, studied their patterns, learned to predict where they would be and when. The mailman who always stopped to light a cigarette at the corner of Columbia and President. The beat cop who took his break behind the fish market at 2:15 every afternoon. The way crowds moved, flowed separated. He didn't know he was training for war. He thought he was hunting pigeons. His father knew better. Giuseppe Castellano worked the docks, loading and unloading cargo ships. Hard work that bent backs and shortened lives. He wanted better for his son. Maybe college. Maybe a trade. Something that didn't end with a destroyed body and a small pension. But he also recognized something in Tony, a focus, a capability for sustained concentration that couldn't be taught. One evening, watching his son clean the rifle with methodical precision, Giuseppe said something he'd been thinking for months. You got a gift, Tony. Don't know what it's good for yet, but you got it. Tony looked up from the rifle. What gift? Patience, real patience, not the kind where you wait because you have to, the kind where you wait because you choose to. That's rare. Giuseppe went back to his newspaper. Didn't say more. Didn't need to. Tony returned to cleaning the rifle. But the words stayed with him. A gift. For what the answer came on December 7, 1941. The radio announcement interrupted Sunday dinner. Tony and his family were halfway through his mother's braciole when the voice cut through the music. Japanese aircraft had attacked an American naval base in Hawaii. Details were still coming in. Casualties were heavy. The president would address Congress tomorrow. Maria Castellano crossed herself, whispered something in Italian. A prayer, probably. Or a curse. Hard to tell sometimes. Giuseppe turned off the radio. The braciole suddenly tasted like paste. They'll want soldiers, Giuseppe said. Not to anyone specifically. To the room. To the future. Tony was 17. He would turn 18 in February. Close enough to see what was coming. That night, he lay in bed listening to the city. Fire trucks, car horns, distant arguments. The normal sounds of Brooklyn. He wondered how long they would stay normal. How long before the war changed everything? He thought about Frankie Moretti from the deli, Jimmy O'Connor who boxed at the gym on 5th. Good guys. Friends, though Tony didn't have many of those. They would go. Frankie had already been talking about enlisting. Jimmy, too. If they went, could Tony stay behind? Could he stay on rooftops, shooting pigeons while they were somewhere else? Doing something that mattered. The answer arrived before the question finished forming. Number. Whatever gift his father said he had, whatever he'd learned on those rooftops, it belonged to the country now. Whether the country knew it yet or not. December 10th, 1941. 3 days after Pearl Harbor. Tony walked into the Army recruiting station on Atlantic Avenue. The line stretched out the door. Young men, old men, boys lying about their age. Everyone wanting to sign up. Everyone wanting to hit back. The recruiter was a heavy-set sergeant with tired eyes. He processed applications with the enthusiasm of a man stamping forms at the post office. Name, age, address, next of kin, medical conditions, criminal record. Age? The sergeant asked without looking up. 18, Tony said. He was 17 but would turn 18 in 2 months. Close enough. The lie came easily. The sergeant glanced at him, saw a lean kid, average height, nothing remarkable. The kind of kid who would probably end up in the infantry, probably die in some field somewhere, probably be forgotten. You ever fired a weapon? Yes, sir. What kind? Remington .22, hunting rifle. The sergeant made a note, still not impressed. Half the kids from Brooklyn had shot something. Hunting pigeons didn't make you a soldier. Any special skills? Tony hesitated. What were his skills? Waiting on rooftops. Being still for hours. Those didn't sound like military assets. I can hit small targets at long range, he said. The sergeant looked up. How long? 200 yards with iron sights. Now the sergeant was interested. Consistently. Yes, sir. The sergeant made another note. This one underlined. We'll test that at basic. If you're telling the truth, might be something for you besides carrying a rifle through mud. Tony left with papers and a date, January 15th, Camp Upton on Long Island. Basic training. He walked home slowly, taking in the neighborhood. The streets he'd walked his whole life. The rooftops where he'd spent so many hours. Everything looked the same, but felt different. Like seeing a photograph of a place you used to live. His mother cried when he told her. The silent kind again. The dangerous kind. His father shook his hand, didn't say the thing they were both thinking. That Giuseppe had been too old for the last war, that he'd watched neighbors leave and not return, that now history was repeating with his son in it. Instead, Giuseppe said, do your job, keep your head down, come home. Simple instructions, possible to guarantee. Basic training was basic training. Marching push-ups, rifle qualification, gas mask drills. Tony excelled at the rifle range, struggled with the social aspects. The Army wanted men who bonded with their units, who fought for each other. Tony was used to being alone, but on the range he was extraordinary. The qualification course required hitting man-sized targets at 100, 200, and 300 yards. 40 rounds, minimum score to pass 32 hits. Tony fired 40 rounds. 40 hits, every single one inside the 10 ring. The range instructor, a corporal named Davies, walked down to Tony's position, looked at the target, looked at Tony, looked back at the target. Where'd you learn to shoot, Private? Rooftops, Corporal. Brooklyn. What were you shooting, or pigeons, Corporal? Davies stared at him, trying to decide if this was a joke. Decided it wasn't. Wait here. Davies returned with a captain. The captain examined the target, examined Tony, asked him to do it again. Tony did it again. 40 rounds, 40 hits. 2 weeks later, Tony received orders. Report to Camp Perry, Ohio. Sniper school. The school was small, 47 students selected from thousands. The washout rate was over 50%. The training was designed to be brutal. Not physically, though, that was part of it. Mentally. Could you calculate wind drift and elevation and lead time while exhausted and cold and scared? Could you make a shot that mattered when making it meant someone died? The chief instructor was Captain James Whitaker. Thin man, early 40s, with eyes that had seen too much. He'd been a sniper in the First World War, back when the doctrine was still being written, back when they were still figuring out what worked and what got you killed. The first day of training, Whitaker gathered the students in a classroom. No inspirational speech, no welcome, just information delivered in a flat tone. You're here to learn to kill people from far away. That's the job, no romance to it, no glory. You'll get good at it or you'll wash out. If you get good at it and go overseas, you'll probably die anyway. Counter snipers, artillery mortars, bad luck. The average life expectancy of a sniper in combat is 6 weeks. He let that settle. The single most important rule that will keep you alive is this: never fire more than 3 shots from the same position. 3 shots maximum. Then you move. You move far, at least 200 yards. You relocate before the enemy can triangulate your position and kill you. Whitaker walked to a map on the wall. European terrain, villages and fields. Every sniper who ignores this rule dies. I've seen it. I've reported on it. I've scraped what was left of them into bags. 3 shots. Then move. This isn't optional. This isn't something you do when it's convenient. This is the difference between going home and being buried in a foreign field. He turned back to face them. Questions? No one spoke. Good. Let's see if you can shoot. Tony could shoot. He finished 3rd in the class. Not first, which bothered him briefly until he realized the top 2 students had been competitive marksmen before the war. They trained for years in formal settings with coaches and equipment. Tony had trained on rooftops with pigeons and patience. 3rd was impressive. More impressive was what Tony learned during the training. Not just mechanics, though he mastered those. The real education was in doctrine, in the accumulated wisdom of men who had done this job and survived long enough to teach others. The 3-shot rule made sense. Tony understood the logic. A muzzle flash could be spotted. A sound could be triangulated. 3 shots gave the enemy enough data points to locate you. After 3 shots, you were a target. The doctrine was written in blood, in the bodies of snipers who thought they were clever enough to take a 4th shot, a 5th, who thought their position was too good to abandon. Tony memorized it all, absorbed it, promised himself he would follow it. He didn't know yet that promises made in training and promises kept in combat were different species of commitment. May 1944, Tony shipped out to England with the 99th Infantry Division. They called themselves the Battle Babies. Fresh division, no combat experience, scheduled to be held in reserve during the invasion of France. June 6th, D-Day. Tony's division wasn't part of the initial assault. They waited in England listening to reports, hearing about the beaches, the casualties, the foothold. June 9th, the 99th landed in Normandy. 3 days after D-Day, after the worst of it, they moved inland through villages with names Tony couldn't pronounce. Saw their first dead Germans, their first dead Americans. The theoretical became actual. Tony's first kill happened on June 14th. A German soldier, maybe 150 yards away, manning a machine gun position that had pinned down an American patrol. Tony was positioned in the 2nd story of a destroyed building. Good sight lines, good cover. He took the shot. The German slumped over the weapon. Tony had killed pigeons hundreds of times. This felt different. The scope had shown him the man's face in the moment before. Young, scared, doing his job, same as Tony, but the American patrol advanced. Nobody died because of that machine gun. The arithmetic worked. Over the next 6 months, Tony accumulated 38 confirmed kills. Good numbers. Solid sniper work. He followed doctrine, shot 3 times, relocated, shot 3 times, relocated. Stayed alive. He watched other snipers die. Miller took 4 shots from a church bell tower outside Aachen. Germans called in an 88mm artillery piece. The tower ceased to exist. They found parts of Miller scattered across 2 city blocks. Sullivan fired 5 times from a barn loft near Stolberg. Mortar barrage. The barn collapsed. They found his rifle. Never found enough of Sullivan to bury. The message was clear. The doctrine existed for a reason. Follow it or die. Tony followed it until December. December 16th, 1944, 5:30 in the morning, Tony was in a dugout near Rocherath, Belgium. The 99th was holding a quiet sector. Nothing happening, boring duty, the kind where you started thinking about Christmas, about letters from home, about surviving the war. Then the horizon turned orange. 1,600 German artillery pieces opened fire simultaneously. Shells fell like metal rain. The ground shook. Trees exploded. The dugout, which had seemed flimsy before, suddenly seemed like the only safe place in the universe. The barrage lasted 90 minutes. When it stopped, the German infantry came. Not scattered units, not probing attacks. Waves of them. 28 German divisions hitting 4 American divisions. The largest German offensive of the war. Later they would call it the Battle of the Bulge. Right then it was chaos. American lines collapsed. Units scattered. Communications broke down. Tony's squad, 12 men under Sergeant Patrick O'Brien, found themselves cut off, surrounded by Germans in every direction. Radio destroyed. No contact with command. No idea where the rest of the division was. O'Brien made the call. They retreated into the forest south of Rochereth, found a hillside with good defensive positions, dug in, waited. From their position, Tony could see a logging road below. Narrow dirt track cutting through the forest. Nothing special about it, except the Germans were using it. And Tony noticed. The logging road saw its first traffic at dawn. 6 German soldiers moving south with the confidence of men deep behind their own lines. They walked casually, rifles slung over shoulders, one of them smoking, 2 others laughing about something. Tony watched them through his scope from the hillside position. 800 yards, maybe 830. Easy range for the Springfield. The crosshairs settled on the lead soldier's chest. Finger on the trigger, pressure building. He didn't fire. The Germans passed out of sight around a bend. Gone. Sergeant Patrick O'Brien crawled over to Tony's position. O'Brien was 37 from South Boston, had worked construction before the war. Good sergeant, the kind who kept men alive by being careful. Why didn't you take the shot, O'Brien asked. One shot gives away our position, Tony said. We're surrounded. Can't risk them knowing we're here. O'Brien nodded, sound reasoning. They'd been ordered to stay hidden, wait for the American counterattack, survive. But Tony kept watching the road. 45 minutes later, another group. 8 Germans this time. Infantry with a motorcycle courier, again casual movement. No security, no scouts. They weren't expecting Americans this far behind the breakthrough. An hour after that, a half-track with supplies. Then another group of infantry. Then an officer's car. By mid-afternoon, Tony had counted 47 German soldiers using that road, all moving south, all carrying his supplies, ammunition orders, all feeding the German offensive. He started doing calculations in his head. If the Germans were using this road as a supply route, and if it could be shut down, and if the Germans had to retreat, that would add time. Hours, maybe. Hours meant delay. Delay meant the American reinforcements had more time to arrive. More time meant more American soldiers survived. But shutting down the road meant staying in one position. Meant firing more than 3 shots. Meant violating everything they'd taught him at Camp Perry. Meant probably dying. Tony kept calculating anyway. One American life is traded for disrupting an entire supply route. Traded for maybe dozens of convoys delayed. Traded for time. The numbers worked. The doctrine said it was suicide. That night after dark, Tony approached O'Brien. The sergeant was sitting by a small fire carefully shielded from view, heating a can of rations. The rest of the squad was scattered in fighting positions around the hillside. Sarge, that logging road, Tony began. O'Brien looked up. What about it? I can close it. O'Brien studied him. Doctrine says shoot and move. Doctrine wasn't written for this situation. Doctrine was written exactly for this situation. Stay in place, they find you. Mortars, artillery, counter-snipers. You'll be dead by noon. Tony had thought this through, had the arguments ready. We can't move. We're surrounded. Every direction has Germans, but I can make that road unusable. Force them to find another route. Add hours to their timeline. Buy time for our people. O'Brien pulled out a cigarette. Didn't light it. Just rolled it between his fingers. How many shots you planning? As many as it takes. Command says 3 maximum. Command isn't here. The fire crackled. Somewhere distant, artillery rumbled. The war continuing. O'Brien finally lit the cigarette, took a long drag. You understand what you're proposing, court-martial. Direct violation of orders. Assuming we live long enough for a court-martial. I understand. And you still want to do it? Yes. O'Brien smoked in silence for a full minute. Tony waited. This was O'Brien's decision as much as his. The sergeant could order him not to, could keep him with the squad, could play it safe. Finally, O'Brien spoke. I'll deny this conversation happened. You do what you think is right. But if mortars come, you're on your own. I can't spare men to pull you out. Understood. O'Brien looked at him, really looked at him. Castellano, you know the odds. Yes. And, Tony thought about his father. Do your job, keep your head down, come home. simple instructions he was about to ignore. Sometimes the job means not keeping your head down. O'Brien nodded slowly. Good luck. Tony spent 2 hours preparing. He needed the right position, high enough to see the road, stable enough to shoot from, concealed enough to avoid immediate detection. He found it 60 yards behind the squad's position, a massive oak tree, old-growth thick trunk branches spreading wide. 40 feet up, three heavy branches intersected to form a natural platform, maybe 3 feet by 4 feet, enough room to sit to position the rifle to survive, if he survived. The climb took 20 minutes in darkness, each branch tested for stability, each movement slow and silent. Germans owning the forest now, sound carried in the cold air. One mistake, and a patrol would investigate. At the platform, Tony began the setup. First, security. He lashed himself to the trunk with parachute cord, tight enough to hold him if he passed out, loose enough to allow movement for shooting. If he fell asleep, if hypothermia took him, if he died up here, at least his body wouldn't fall. Small comfort. Next, ammunition. He'd brought 20 rounds in his pack. Not enough for what he planned, but O'Brien had given him a canvas bag before he climbed. Inside, 60 more rounds. 80 total. The sergeant understanding, without being told what this mission required. Tony arranged the ammunition carefully within arm's reach. In the dark, by feel alone, he needed to know exactly where each round was. No fumbling, no wasted movement. Then the essentials. Canteen, 2 cans of K rations, extra wool blanket. The temperature was already near zero. It would get colder. Finally, camouflage. Pine boughs arranged around the position. Not perfect, but enough to break up his outline. Enough to make a German, scanning the tree line, see branches, not a man. He positioned the Springfield, checked the scope, covered the lens with cloth to prevent reflection, settled into wait. The platform was hard, uncomfortable. His back already ached. He would be here for hours, days maybe, however long it took. Tony pulled out a small notebook from his breast pocket. Army issue. He'd been using it to write letters home. Now he tore out a page and wrote something different. Position occupied 18 December 1944, 0047 hours. Location oak tree, 60 yards rear of squad position. Mission deny enemy use of supply route. Expected duration until killed or relieved. Probability of survival low. If I die, don't blame Sergeant O'Brien. This was my choice. Expiration date unknown. Anthony Castellano. He tucked the note into his jacket. If they found his body, at least they'd know it was voluntary. Then he settled against the trunk rifle across his lap and watched the dark road below. Waited for dawn, waited to see if his calculations would hold, waited to become either a hero or a cautionary tale. The forest emerged from darkness slowly, black becoming gray, becoming the pale light of winter morning. Tony had been in position for 4 hours. He hadn't slept, couldn't risk it. Sleep meant falling, cord or no cord. His breath crystallized instantly in the cold. Each exhale a small cloud of vapor, visible, dangerous. He breathed through the wool scarf wrapped around his face, warming the air, diffusing the cloud. 6:47 in the morning. Movement on the road, 6 German soldiers. SS by their insignia, young faces, 18, 19 maybe. The age Tony had been when he enlisted. They moved with the ease of men who owned the territory, rifles slung, one smoking, 2 laughing. Tony watched them come. Let them move into the center of his field of view, 830 yards by his estimate, well within range. He removed the cloth from his scope. The lens was cold. His eye adjusted to the magnification. The lead German filled the crosshairs. Center mass. Heart and lungs. Wind check. Minimal. Maybe 3 miles per hour left to right. Cold air, dense, less drift than summer shooting. Adjust point of aim, 2 inches left. Range 830. Bullet drop at this distance with the Springfield maybe 18 inches. The scope was already zeroed for 800. Point of aim at upper chest would put the round center mass. Calculations done. The German paused to adjust his rifle strap. Tony squeezed the trigger. The rifle pushed back against his shoulder. The sound cracked through the forest. Through the scope, Tony saw the German jerk backward, fall into the snow. The other 5 scattered instantly. Training kicking in, they dove for cover on both sides of the road. Began scanning for the shooter. Tony was already working the bolt. Smooth motion, muscle memory from thousands of practice repetitions. Brass ejected, fresh round chambered. Second target, a German behind a fallen log. Partial exposure. Head and shoulders visible. Squeeze. Hit. The German slumped. 4 remaining. They were returning fire now, shooting at the hillside nowhere near Tony's actual position. The sound and cold air played tricks. The distance made muzzle flash invisible in daylight. They knew the general direction, but nothing precise. Third shot. Third hit. A German trying to move to better cover. Fourth shot. Miss. The target had shifted at the last instant. Bullet struck snow 2 feet to the left. Fifth shot. Corrected aim. Hit. 2 Germans left, both running north back the way they came. Retreating. Tony tracked the lead runner, led him, accounting for speed and angle. Squeezed, the German tumbled into snow. The last one made it around a bend in the road. Escaped. 5 kills, 6 shots. 90 seconds elapsed. Tony reloaded, arranged his brass. 5 empty casings, he pocketed them. Evidence. Later, if there was a later, they might matter. His hands were shaking. Not fear, adrenaline and cold. He flexed his fingers, getting blood flowing. 5 men dead. 5 men who had been laughing 2 minutes ago. Tony pulled out the notebook, made an entry, hands trembling slightly as he wrote. Kill 1 through 5, 647 to 648. German SS infantry. Lead soldier was smoking. Second tried to help the first. Third had good instincts, used cover. Fourth I missed, then corrected. Fifth was the runner. Sixth escaped. They were just kids doing their job. He put the notebook away. Waited. 23 minutes later, 15 Germans appeared from the north. Moving cautiously now, weapons ready, an NCO directing them. They'd heard about the ambush, were investigating. They advanced using cover. Proper tactics. Not the casual walk of the first group. Smart. But they made a mistake. When they reached the bodies, they clustered together, examining the dead, trying to determine bullet trajectories, looking for the sniper's position. Clustering was fatal. Tony waited until 8 of them were within a 10-foot circle, fired into the cluster. 1 dropped immediately. The others scattered again, but now Tony was tracking firing, working the bolt smoothly. 2, 3, 4 more down before they found cover. The return fire intensified. Rounds hitting trees around Tony, branches snapping, bark exploding. 1 round passed close enough that Tony heard the supersonic crack 6 inches from his head. He ignored it, kept shooting. Methodical, calm, the same way he'd shot pigeons. Movement and noise didn't matter. Only the target mattered. Only the squeeze. When the firing stopped, 9 Germans were down. 6 had retreated. Tony reloaded, made notes in his book. Kill 6 through 14, 710 to 713. They tried to examine the first bodies. Bad tactics when sniper unlocated. Clustering makes easy targets. But they were trying to help their people. That counts for something. The morning continued, 9:32. 12 Germans with better tactics. They used cover well, advanced carefully. Tony picked off exposed targets, 3 kills. They withdrew after realizing they couldn't advance safely. 11:52, 18 Germans with an NCO. Tony eliminated the NCO first. Leadership kill. The formation lost coordination immediately. 5 more down before they broke and retreated. By 2 in the afternoon, the logging road was empty. No more attempts, no movement. The Germans had given up trying to use it. Tony counted bodies through his scope, 29 visible on the road. Others had been dragged away by retreating soldiers. Actual count probably 32, 33. 42 rounds fired from his initial 80. 38 rounds remaining. The road was closed. Tony couldn't climb down. Coming down meant the mission ended, meant the road could be used again. He stayed. The temperature dropped to 4 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold that hurt. Cold that killed. He wrapped himself in every layer he had. The wool blanket, extra socks on his hands, the scarf around his face. It wasn't enough. The cold penetrated everything. His feet went numb around 2 a.m. He flexed his toes inside his boots, couldn't feel them moving. Frostbite was starting. He knew the signs. had seen it happen to other soldiers. Nothing he could do about it. Around 10 p.m. O'Brien climbed up to his position, brought hot coffee in a thermos, water, more rations. "You're fucking insane," O'Brien said quietly. "You know that?" Tony's jaw was too stiff from cold to answer immediately. Finally managed, "Probably. They'll figure out where you are. Bring mortars." "Maybe." O'Brien looked at the empty road below, bodies visible in the moonlight like dark humps in the snow. "You shut down their supply route. That's something." "Just started." "Can you sleep up here?" "No, fall if I sleep. Tied in, but can't risk it." O'Brien was quiet for a moment. Then, "Jesus Christ, Castellano, you planning to stay awake for 3 days?" "Long as it takes," O'Brien started to say something, started again. "You're the bravest, crazy bastard I ever met." He climbed back down. Tony was alone again. The night stretched, hours passing with glacial slowness. Tony couldn't sleep, couldn't move much, could only sit and wait and try to keep his core temperature up. He thought about home, about Brooklyn, about his mother's kitchen. Warm kitchen, pasta on the stove, the smell of garlic and tomatoes. So far away it might as well be on another planet. He thought about the men he'd killed. 29 confirmed. Each one had a face. The smoking one, the one trying to help his friend, the officer organizing the search. They were somebody's sons, somebody's brothers, maybe somebody's fathers. The calculations still worked. One American traded for dozens of Germans, dozens of delays in the supply chain, time bought for reinforcements. But those calculations didn't account for the weight. Tony pulled out his notebook. In the darkness by feel, he found the page. Added an entry writing slowly with stiff fingers. Night of December 18th. Cannot feel feet. Hands barely functional. Temperature approximately 4 degrees. Have killed 29 confirmed today. Remember all their faces. Don't know how I feel about that. Don't know if I'm supposed to feel anything. Mission continues tomorrow if I survive the night. He put the notebook away, watched his breath freeze in the darkness. Waited for dawn, 4:47 a.m. Tony had survived the night. Barely. His core temperature was dropping. Early hypothermia setting in. Thoughts moving slower. Words forming with difficulty in his mind. But the road was still empty. The Germans came at 6:23 with better tactics. 23 soldiers in a proper skirmish line. 20-yard spacing. Officer directing with hand signals. SS troops, well-trained. Tony waited until they committed to crossing his kill zone. Then he started with the officer. Leadership kill. The officer dropped. The formation immediately lost its cohesion. Men looking around confused, no one giving orders. Tony worked left to right across the line. Firework bolt, acquire target fire. Rhythm like a metronome. Like shooting pigeons in sequence. 7 down before they pinpointed his general direction. Then the return fire started. Heavy this time. Disciplined. Multiple soldiers firing at the hillside. At the trees, rounds hitting everywhere. Branches exploded above Tony. Bark fragments rained down. One round struck 6 inches from his head. The supersonic cracked so close he felt the air displacement. He kept firing. 11 down, 12, 13. The survivors broke. Running, Tony tracked them. Leading the runners, firing, 15 down, 16, 7 escaped, 16 kills, 21 rounds expended. Running total from the tree. 45 Germans in approximately 30 hours. Tony reloaded with hands that barely functioned. The cold had taken most of his dexterity. He dropped a round, watched it fall 40 feet to the snow below. Gone. 17 rounds remaining in his position. Maybe not enough. His body was failing, fingers on his left hand going numb. 2 on his right losing sensation. Feet completely without feeling now. The frostbite advancing from stage 1 to stage 2. Tissue damage occurring. Irreversible. He flexed what fingers still worked. Kept blood moving where he could. The mission continued. 11 a.m. The Germans changed tactics. They brought up an MG-42, the weapon that fired 1,200 rounds per minute, the one American soldiers called Hitler's buzzsaw. 2-man team, gunner and assistant, setting up 850 yards north, behind a fallen log, good position. Their plan was obvious. Suppress Tony's position with automatic fire. Keep his head down while infantry flanked. Good plan. Tony saw them setting up. The gunner wrestling the weapon into position, the assistant feeding the belt. He had maybe 30 seconds before they opened fire. Tony aimed. The gunner's head and shoulders were visible above the log. Squeeze. The gunner collapsed backward. The assistant grabbed the weapon, tried to get behind it. Tony worked the bolt. Fired again. The assistant fell. MG-42, silent. But now the Germans had a precise fix on Tony's location. He'd fired from the same tree for more than 30 hours. Every shot gave them better data, better triangulation. The mortars were coming. Tony knew it the way you know rain is coming from the smell of the air. 11:17 a.m. Thump, 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 thump. 4 distant impacts. Launch signature of 81mm mortars. 4 tubes firing. Flight time approximately 12 seconds. This was it. This was how Miller died. How Sullivan died. How every sniper who stayed too long died. Tony pressed himself against the trunk. Made himself as small as possible. There was nowhere to go. No escape. Just the tree and the parachute cord holding him, and 12 seconds until impact. He closed his eyes, thought of his mother making Sunday gravy, thought of his father saying come home, thought of the 47 men he'd killed, 47 faces he would take to whatever came next. Wondered if this was payment, if the universe required balance. 47 lives taken, 1 life given. 10 seconds, 9 seconds, 8 seconds. The world contracted to just the waiting, just the knowledge that high explosive was arcing through the sky, falling toward him, mathematics and physics and trajectory all converging on this tree, on this moment. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. His life didn't flash before his eyes, just fragments. His grandfather's rifle, the first pigeon. His mother crying, O'Brien lighting a cigarette, the German with the wedding ring. 2, 1, impact. The first salvo hit 40 yards short. 4 explosions. Snow and frozen earth geysering into the air. Shrapnel screaming through the trees. The oak shook from concussion. Tony's ears rang, but he was alive. The Germans were walking the fire, adjusting. Next salvo would be closer. 15 seconds between volleys. Thump, 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 thump. Second salvo launching. 12 seconds. This one would be close. Tony pressed harder against the trunk, as if a few inches mattered against high explosive. Impact. 20 yards short. Much closer. The explosions were deafening. Branches directly above Tony disintegrated. Bark and wood fragments filled the air. Something hot grazed his shoulder. Shrapnel, small piece. Burned through his coat. The tree shook violently. Tony tasted blood, had bitten his tongue. Third salvo should kill him. The pattern was clear. They'd bracketed the range. Next adjustment would be dead on. He waited for the sound. 15 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. No sound. No third salvo. Tony waited another full minute. Still nothing. The mortars had stopped. He didn't know why. Couldn't know that American counter-battery radar had picked up the German mortar flash, had triangulated their position in seconds, had called in fire from divisional artillery, 105mm howitzers, had destroyed the German tubes and crew before they could fire a third salvo. Pure luck or divine intervention. Tony would never know which. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. Not from cold now, from adrenaline crash, from the simple fact of still being alive when he shouldn't be. He pulled out the notebook. His hands shook so badly he could barely write. The pencil scratched across paper letters barely legible. 11:17, 4 mortar tubes, 2 salvos, survived. Don't know why. Third salvo would have killed me. Stop firing. Maybe God, maybe luck. Maybe their tubes were destroyed. Don't care. Still alive. Still mission. He paused, added a line. 47 kills so far, each one somebody's son. He put the notebook away, looked at the sky through bare branches. Didn't say thank you because he didn't know who to thank. Just breathed. Still alive. Against all odds. Still alive. The afternoon brought more attempts. The Germans were determined now. The road mattered. Or maybe their pride was stung. Either way, they kept coming. 1:15 p.m. 14 German infantry with better spacing. Tony engaged methodically. 6 kills before they withdrew. The others retreated after realizing they couldn't advance without unacceptable casualties. 3:40 p.m. A probe by motorcycle courier with escort. 4 soldiers. Tony killed 3. The courier escaped. 5:30 p.m. The Germans tried stealth. 8 soldiers moving in twilight using maximum cover. Tony's cold-numbed fingers made shooting harder. 2 kills. The rest faded back into forest. As darkness fell, Tony counted the day's total. Morning engagement, 16 kills. Machine gun team, 2 kills. Afternoon engagements, 11 kills. 29 kills on December 19th. Combined with December 18th, 29 plus 29 equals 58 total. He had 22 rounds remaining, his original 80 minus 58 fired. The road was completely empty now, not a single German visible. The psychological impact had taken full hold. Soldiers were refusing to use the route. Word had spread through German units. The cursed road, Ettersigbode, the ghost in the trees, der Waldgeist. Fear accomplished what bullets alone couldn't. Tony's physical condition was critical. The hypothermia had progressed. Stage 2 approaching stage 3. Core temperature probably 88 or 89 degrees. Normal was 98.6. Symptoms, severe confusion. Slurred mental processing. Loss of fine motor control. Paradoxical undressing impulse starting. His body wanted him to remove his coat. His brain, the rational part still functioning, knew that would kill him. He kept the coat on. Cannot feel feet at all now. The frostbite was stage 3. Tissue death occurring. He would lose toes, maybe more. Cannot feel 3 fingers left hand, 2 fingers right hand. He could still pull a trigger with his right index finger. That was what mattered. Night fell. O'Brien climbed up again with the difficulty. The sergeant was exhausted too. The whole squad running on fumes. More coffee, more food, more water. They tried to kill you with mortars, O'Brien said. Tony nodded. Couldn't speak. Jaw too frozen. And you're staying. Another nod. Why boy? Tony forced words out. Slow, slurred, each word an effort. Working, road empty, mission success. O'Brien looked at him. Really looked. Saw the hypothermia, the frostbite. The 1,000-yard stare starting. The way Tony's eyes didn't quite focus right. You're dying up here, Castellano. Not yet. How much longer? Long as needed. O'Brien shook his head, reached out, put a hand on Tony's shoulder. The gesture of a man who knew he was watching someone die slowly. Reinforcements are coming, 2, maybe 3 days. Can you last that long? Tony thought about it, honest assessment of his body's limits. Don't know, maybe. That's not an answer. Only one I got. O'Brien climbed back down without another word. What else was there to say? Tony had made his choice. Was living with it or dying with it? Didn't matter which at this point. Tony wrapped himself tighter in the blanket, flexed his fingers and toes, trying to keep blood flowing. Mostly failing, the cold was winning, had been winning since hour 12. Now at hour 50, it was just a question of how fast. He pulled out the notebook one more time, writing by feel now. Couldn't see the page clearly in darkness. Didn't matter. This was for him, for memory, for whoever found his body if the cold took him tonight. End of day 2, 58 confirmed kills, road completely shut down, no German traffic since 1730 hours. Mission successful so far. Physical condition, critical. Hypothermia. Stage 2 progressing to stage 3. Frostbite severe, both feet, both hands. Estimate 30% chance of surviving night. 50% chance of surviving tomorrow if I survive tonight. But the road stays closed. That's what matters. If I die, tell my parents I did my job. Tell O'Brien thank you. Tell command this was voluntary. Nobody made me do this. He closed the notebook, settled against the trunk, watched the stars through gaps in the branches. Clear night, cold night, the kind of cold that killed. Wondered if he'd see another dawn. Decided he probably would. His grandfather's blood, Sicilian stubbornness. Stone didn't give up just because it was cold. Decided he'd stay until he couldn't. Simple as that. Dawn arrived without Tony noticing the transition. Night and day had blurred. His mind was slipping. Not panic, not fear, just the slow dissolution that came with severe hypothermia. Thoughts arriving late, words forming slowly, reality becoming dreamlike. He'd been in the tree for 64 hours. His core temperature had dropped below 90 degrees. In a hospital, doctors would be preparing emergency warming protocols. Out here, 40 feet up, in a Belgian oak, there was only the cold and the waiting. Tony flexed his fingers, barely felt them move. The frostbite had advanced. 3 fingers on his left hand were completely numb, 2 on his right. When this was over, if there was an over, he'd probably lose them. Small price. He checked his ammunition, 22 rounds remaining, enough for one more engagement if the Germans came. If they didn't, he could hold position another day, maybe 2, until hypothermia took him or rescue arrived, whichever came first. 7:34 a.m. Movement on the road. Not a patrol, not a small group. 41 soldiers, full platoon strength, 2 half-tracks with mounted MG-42s. This was commitment. This was the Germans deciding the road mattered enough to force it open regardless of cost. Tony watched them form up. Infantry behind the half-tracks, officers coordinating. Good tactics. The half-tracks would suppress his position with automatic fire while infantry flanked or rushed through. Solid plan. He adjusted his position. The Springfield felt heavy. Everything felt heavy. He was so tired. Tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. The kind of tired that came from burning yourself out completely. But 22 rounds remained. 41 Germans needed to be stopped. The numbers didn't work. Even at 80% accuracy, 22 rounds meant maybe 18 kills. Not enough to stop 41 soldiers with armored support. But numbers had stopped meaning much somewhere around hour 40. Tony had stopped trusting the calculations, started trusting something else. Instinct, will. The lessons from rooftops where patience mattered more than speed. He raised the rifle. The first half-track was accelerating, coming fast. The gunner behind the MG-42 was already firing, suppressive fire hitting the trees around Tony's position. Branches exploding, the air filled with splinters and noise. Tony ignored it, focused on the driver's vision port. Small target, 6 inches by 3 inches. At 800 yards, while the vehicle bounced over rough road, while hypothermia slowed his hands, while his fingers barely functioned. Impossible shot. He took it anyway. First round struck low, hit the half-track's hood. Second round, adjusted elevation. Led the target accounting for speed. Squeezed smoothly despite the shaking hands. Through the scope, he saw the driver jerk. The half-track swerved violently. Left the road, crashed into a tree. Stopped. German infantry poured out the back. Tony was already tracking. Fire. Work bolt. Fire. 4 down before they reached cover. The second half-track kept coming. Gunner firing, the sound of the MG-42 like tearing canvas. Rounds hitting everywhere. One struck the branch 6 inches above Tony's head. The branch cracked, sagged, held. Tony switched targets, the gunner. Visible behind the weapon shield. Partially exposed. First shot missed. Vehicle moving too fast. Unpredictable bounce. Second and shot. Led the target more. Anticipated the bounce. Hit. The gunner slumped. The MG-42 fell silent. Infantry now. 41 soldiers down to maybe 28 operational. They scattered, using available cover, advancing in bounds. Professional tactics. Tony worked methodically. Target, fire, reload. Target, fire, each shot deliberate, each one counting because ammunition was finite and Germans were not. 27 left, 26, 24. Return fire intensified. The Germans had located him precisely now. Multiple soldiers firing at his tree, at his exact position. Wood exploding around him, the oak tree shaking with impacts. Tony kept shooting. 23, 21, 19. The Germans weren't advancing anymore. They were pinned, taking cover, unable to move forward without exposing themselves, unable to retreat without admitting defeat. Stalemate. Tony had 9 rounds left. 19 Germans remained. Poor ratio. He waited, patient, Stone doesn't rush. The Germans would have to move eventually. Advance or retreat. Either way meant exposure. Minutes passed. The firing slowed. Stopped. Both sides waiting. Then the Germans made their decision. 8:09 a.m. They retreated, started pulling back, dragging wounded, leaving dead. Tony shot 5 more as they withdrew, then held fire with 4 rounds remaining. Let them go. Needed to conserve. If they came back, he'd need something to shoot. But they didn't come back. The road was quiet. Bodies littered the logging route. German soldiers and 2 disabled half-tracks. The road wasn't just closed. It was a graveyard, a monument to what happens when you underestimate patience. Tony counted visible bodies through his scope. 22 on the road from this engagement. Others had been carried away. Actual casualties, probably 27, maybe higher. He pulled out his notebook with shaking hands. Did the calculation. Day 1, 29 kills. Day 2, 29 kills. Day 3, 29 kills. Total 87 confirmed kills. 107 rounds fired from 80 initial rounds, plus O'Brien's resupply. Accuracy, 81%. Mission accomplished. Now he just had to survive long enough for it to matter. He wrote in the notebook, kill 59 through 87, final engagement, December 20th, 0734 through 0813, German platoon with half-track support. Tried to force the road. They failed. Road remains closed. I hope this was worth it. I remember every face. He closed the notebook. Put it away. The tree swayed slightly in morning wind. Or maybe that was his vision. Hard to tell. The hypothermia was making everything strange. He settled against the trunk. 4 rounds remaining. Body temperature critical. Maybe 3 hours left before he passed out. Maybe 6 before he died. But the mission was complete. 87 German soldiers would never reach their destinations. The supply route was broken. The offensive defeated. 1 American life for 87 German lives plus uncounted hours of delay. The arithmetic finally balanced. Tony closed his eyes, not to sleep, just to rest them, to wait for what came next, rescue or death. He'd done his job either way. 2:47 p.m. Tony heard American voices, English, the accent of home. 2nd Infantry Division had arrived. Reinforcements pushing into the sector. The German offensive had stalled here. Multiple reasons. Fuel shortages, American resistance, and 1 logging road that became unusable. O'Brien was shouting, pointing at the oak tree. Soldiers looking up. Tony tried to call down. His voice wouldn't work. Jaw frozen, throat raw. He started to untie the parachute cord. His fingers wouldn't cooperate. The knots had frozen. The cord had frozen to his jacket. He pulled weakly. Nothing. One of the soldiers climbed up. Young kid, couldn't have been more than 19. Face full of wonder and horror at what he found. Tony sitting against the trunk, rifle across his lap, hands blue-black with frostbite, face gray, eyes sunken, looking more dead than alive. Jesus Christ, the kid said. How long you been up here? Tony couldn't answer. Mouth wouldn't form words. The kids started working on the knots, called down for help. Another soldier climbed up. Between them, they got Tony untied, got him moving. The climb down took 15 minutes. Tony's legs wouldn't work. Frostbite in his feet severe. They had to lower him like cargo, rope under his arms, other soldiers guiding from below. When his feet touched ground, his legs collapsed immediately. No strength, no feeling. Just gravity, winning. O'Brien caught him, held him up. You did it, you crazy bastard, O'Brien said. Tony tried to respond, managed 1 word, slurred, barely audible. How many? 87. We counted 87 bodies, probably more wounded that got evacuated. Tony nodded. The number meant something, should mean something, but his brain was too cold to process significance. I remember all of them, he whispered. O'Brien looked at him, didn't understand yet, would later. Medics arrived. Combat medics who'd seen everything the war could do to a human body. They took 1 look at Tony and started working fast. Severe hypothermia, core temp probably high 80s, frostbite stage 3 on hands and feet, dehydration, exhaustion, possible internal injuries from concussion effects. He should be dead. They wrapped him in blankets, started an IV, loaded him onto a stretcher. As they carried him away, one of the medics found the notebook in Tony's jacket pocket, handed it to O'Brien. O'Brien opened it, read the entries. Kill 1 smoking, looked like my brother's age. Kill 23 officer. Wedding ring, kill 47. Cigarette still burning in the snow beside him, kill 87. Last one, I hope this was worth it. The entries went on, every kill documented, not with triumph, with something else. Witness, testimony, the record of a man who needed to remember because forgetting would be worse. O'Brien closed the notebook carefully, put it in his own pocket. Nobody else needed to see this. Not yet. Maybe not ever. This was Tony's burden, his alone. He watched the stretcher disappear toward the aid station, thought about the kid from Brooklyn who hunted pigeons on rooftops, who'd turned that patience into 87 kills, who'd changed how the Army thought about snipers, who'd remember every face for the rest of his life. Tony woke in a field hospital, warm for the first time in 4 days, IV'd in his arm, blankets piled on, fingers and toes bandaged. The pain hadn't started yet, still too cold for pain. A doctor came by, checked vitals, looked impressed Tony was conscious. You're lucky, the doctor said. Frostbite is bad, but we might save most of your fingers. Toes are questionable. You'll know in a few days when circulation returns. Lucky. The word felt strange. Was surviving luck, or was luck never being in the tree at all? How long was I out? Tony's voice was rough, damaged from the cold. 6 hours. You were hypothermic when they brought you in. We've been warming you slowly, too fast, and your heart stops. When can I leave? The doctor laughed, not unkindly. You're not going anywhere for at least a week. Your body needs to recover. After that, probably reassignment. You're not going back to frontline duty in this condition. Tony started to argue, stopped. What was he arguing for? The chance to go back out and do it again? The doctor left. Tony lay in the cot, staring at the canvas ceiling of the tent. Outside, the sounds of war continued. Artillery, trucks, shouted orders. The machinery of violence grinding on. He'd been part of it for 3 days. Now he was separate, an observer again. The way he'd been on rooftops in Brooklyn, watching from above while life happened below. Except now he'd been part of what happened, had made things happen. 87 things that stopped happening because of him. An officer arrived that afternoon. Captain James Buchanan, Battalion Intelligence. He pulled up a chair beside Tony's cot, opened a folder. Private Castellano, I need to debrief you about your actions December 18th through 20th. Tony told him, position selection, fields of fire, target acquisition, kill counts by day, no emotion, just facts. The way you'd report any military action. Buchanan took notes, asked questions. How far? How many rounds? How did you survive the mortar barrage? What was the German reaction? Tony answered everything. Finally, Buchanan closed the folder, looked at Tony directly. You know you violated standing orders. 3-shot maximum from any position. You fired over 100 rounds from the same tree. Yes, sir. You know that's a court-martial offense. Yes, sir. Why did you do it? Tony thought about the answer, the real answer, not the military answer about tactical necessity. The true answer, because it needed doing, sir, and I could do it. Buchanan wrote that down. You understand you should be dead. Those mortars should have killed you. Yes, sir. But they didn't. No, sir. Do you think God was protecting you? The question surprised Tony. Officers didn't usually ask about God. I don't know, sir. Maybe. Or maybe the mortars just got destroyed before they could finish. I'll never know. Buchanan nodded. Major Steinberg from Division Operations is coming tomorrow. He'll want to talk to you. This is bigger than a battalion-level issue now. You shut down a German supply route for 3 days. Intelligence estimates you delayed their offensive in this sector by 24 to 48 hours. That's significant. Did it help, sir? Did we hold? We held? Reinforcements arrived in time. Germans are pulling back in some sectors. You were part of that. Small part, but part. Small part. 87 dead for a small part. The calculations shifting again. Buchanan stood to leave. Paused. Off the record, Castellano, what you did was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest. I haven't decided which. Could be both, sir. Buchanan almost smiled. Yeah, could be both. Major Harold Steinberg arrived the next morning. Older than Buchanan, harder. The kind of officer who'd been doing this since the First World War, who'd seen every kind of soldier, every kind of courage and cowardice. He pulled up a chair, didn't open a folder, just looked at Tony. You caused me a problem, Private. Sir, you violated direct orders, multiple standing regulations. Put yourself at unnecessary risk. Any other circumstances, I'd have you court-martialed and busted down to latrine duty for the rest of the war. Tony said nothing. But you also killed 87 enemy soldiers, shut down a supply route, delayed a German offensive, showed tactical innovation under pressure. Any other circumstances, I'd be recommending you for a medal. Steinberg pulled out a cigarette, lit it. So I have to figure out which you are, a disciplinary problem or an asset. What did you decide, sir? Both, you're both. Steinberg blew smoke toward the tent ceiling. Here's what's happening. Official reprimand in your service record. Letter documenting your violation of standing orders. It'll follow you the rest of your military career. Anyone who looks at your file will see it. Tony nodded. Expected. However, no court-martial, no reduction in rank, and I'm forwarding your case to division sniper training. If your methods can be taught if they work under specific circumstances we need to know. Maybe doctrine needs updating. Sir, I don't think what I did can be taught. Why not? Because it required being willing to die. You can't train that. Either someone has it or they don't. Steinberg considered this. Maybe, but we can train the tactical parts. Position selection, ammunition management, sustainability in static positions. Even if we can't train the courage, we can train the competence. He stood. You're being reassigned. Division headquarters. Sniper instructor. You'll teach what you learn. Share the knowledge, maybe save some lives. I'd rather stay with my unit, sir. Your unit is O'Brien's squad. O'Brien requested this transfer. Said you've done enough. Said it's time for someone else to stand in the trees. Tony understood. O'Brien was protecting him, taking away the choice before Tony could volunteer to do it again. Smart sergeant. When do I start, sir? When the doctors clear you. Couple weeks probably. Until then, rest. Heal. Try not to lose any more body parts to frostbite. Steinberg walked toward the tent entrance. Stopped. Turned back. Off the record, Castellano. What you did changed how we think about sniper operations. Created new consideration for defensive situations. You won't get official credit. That's not how the Army works. But people will know. The ones who matter will know. I don't need credit, sir. Good, because you're not getting any. Steinberg almost smiled. But between you and me, that was the gutsiest thing I've seen in 2 wars. Stupid, reckless, and completely against regulations. But gutsy as hell. He left. Tony lay back on the cot, stared at the ceiling again. Tried to figure out how he felt about all this. The reprimand didn't bother him. The reassignment did. Sniper instructor meant rear area, meant safety, meant living through the war. Also meant never doing the thing he'd discovered he was good at, the thing that mattered. But O'Brien was right. You couldn't stand in trees forever. Eventually the mortars found you. Eventually the cold killed you. Eventually your luck ran out. 3 days had been enough, had been more than enough. 87 was enough. It had to be. Tony spent 3 months as a sniper instructor at division headquarters. Taught 43 students the basics: marksmanship, ballistics, camouflage, patience, and 1 special module: extended position operations. The course material never mentioned his name. Officially, it was based on tactical analysis of Ardennes defensive engagements, study of what worked and what didn't, lessons learned from the Battle of the Bulge. But the students knew. Word had spread. The guy who spent 3 days in a tree, who killed 87 Germans without moving, who survived mortars and hypothermia and changed doctrine. They looked at him with a mixture of awe and fear, like he was part legend, part warning. This is what you could be. This is what it costs. Tony tried to teach them the real lessons, not the dramatic parts, the boring parts that kept you alive. Don't be stupid, he told them. Static positions are suicide in offensive operations. You try this while advancing, you'll die. But in defense with support, sometimes the best position is one that doesn't move. You have to know which situation you're in. How do you know? One student asked. You assess. Can you move without being seen? Do you have escape routes? Is the target valuable enough? Will staying in place achieve the objective better than relocating? What if you're not sure? Then you move. When in doubt, follow standard doctrine. The three-shot rule exists because it saves lives. I broke it because I had no choice. You break it only when you have no choice. They took notes, practiced in training positions. None of them would ever do what Tony did. The circumstances were too specific. The combination of isolation and target-rich environment and defensive necessity too rare. But they learned the principles. Sustainability in static positions, cold weather endurance, ammunition management, the mental aspects of extended observation. Some of them would use this knowledge, maybe in Germany, maybe in the Pacific, maybe in wars that hadn't started yet. Tony hoped they used it better than he had, hoped they didn't accumulate 87 faces they'd remember forever. Germany surrendered May 8th. The war in Europe was over. Tony was still at division headquarters, still teaching, still carrying the weight. His frostbite had healed poorly. He lost 2 toes on his left foot. 3 fingers on his left hand had reduced mobility. Constant pain. The doctors said he was lucky. Could have been worse. Lucky. He received a Bronze Star for valor. The citation read, for exceptional combat effectiveness during defensive operations in the Ardennes sector, December 1944. Demonstrated superior marksmanship and tactical innovation under extreme conditions. No mention of 87 kills. No mention of 3 days. No mention of violating orders. Just exceptional effectiveness. The medal came in a small box. Tony put it in his footlocker. Never wore it. Never showed anyone. It represented something he didn't want to celebrate. July brought rotation orders. Return to the States. Discharge at Fort Dix, home by August. Tony packed his belongings. The Springfield went back to the armory. The scope, too. He kept only the notebook, the one with 87 entries, the record of 3 days that changed everything. O'Brien found him before he left. They shook hands. Didn't say much. What was there to say? They'd had been through something together. Something that didn't need words. You ever regret it? O'Brien asked. Tony thought about the question, considered lying, decided on truth. Every day and not at all, both at the same time. Yeah, O'Brien said. That sounds about right. They shook hands again. O'Brien went back to his squad. Tony went home. September 1945. Tony walked into his parents' apartment on Sullivan Street. Same apartment, same kitchen, same smell of garlic and tomatoes. His mother cried, the good kind this time, the kind that said prayers had been answered. His father shook his hand, held it longer than normal, looked at Tony's face and saw something that hadn't been there before. Something old. Something that didn't belong on a 21-year-old. You came back, Giuseppe said. I came back. That's what matters. But Tony had left something in Belgium. 87 somethings. They stayed in the forest, in the tree, in the snow. No amount of returning erased them. The neighborhood wanted to hear war stories. Tony didn't tell any. Friends asked what he'd done. He said infantry. They pushed for details. He changed the subject. His mother wanted the newspaper to do a story. Local hero returns, Bronze Star recipient. Tony refused firmly. No stories, no interviews, no attention. He just wanted to be normal again. Wanted to be the kid who shot pigeons on rooftops. Before the tree, before the cold, before 87 faces. But normal wasn't available anymore. That person was gone. Tony got a job at LaGuardia Airport, aircraft mechanic. The work was simple: maintain engines, replace parts, keep planes flying. Quiet, methodical. No one shooting at him. He liked it, liked the routine, the predictability, the way a broken engine could be fixed, the way problems had solutions, the way nothing he did killed anyone. 1948, he met Teresa D'Angelo at a dance in the neighborhood. She was a secretary at a law firm, smart, patient, kind. She didn't ask about the war. They married in a small ceremony, her family and his, maybe 50 people. Simple reception in the church basement, dancing to records, cake from the bakery on Court Street. Normal, blessedly normal. Children came. Joseph in 1949, Maria in 1952, Anthony Jr. in 1955. Tony was a good father, patient, present, taught them to read, helped with homework, took them to Prospect Park on weekends, never taught them to shoot, never told them about the war. When they asked when they were older, he said he'd been in the infantry, saw some action in Belgium, nothing special, nothing worth discussing. The truth stayed buried. The notebook stayed in a drawer. The bronze star stayed in its box. But every December 20th, Tony called Patrick O'Brien. The sergeant had survived the war, moved back to Boston, worked construction like before the war, married, had kids. They'd talk for 20 minutes. Surface stuff. How's the family? How's work? How's life? Sometimes O'Brien would ask, "You still crazy?" Tony would answer every day. Neither mentioned the oak tree. Didn't need to. Both knew. Both carried it. The calls continued for decades. Every December 20th. Like clockwork. Like ritual. The only acknowledgement that 3 days in 1944 had happened. Teresa noticed. Noticed Tony got quiet in December. Noticed the nightmares increased. Noticed he'd wake shaking sometimes, screaming always in December. She asked once what haunted him. Tony tried to explain. "I killed a lot of people. Some deserved it. Some were just kids following orders. I don't know how to feel about that. Don't know if I should feel proud or ashamed or nothing. Just don't know." Teresa held his hand. "You did what you had to do. Doesn't make it easier. Not supposed to be easy." The nightmares continued. Every December, like the cold had never left. Like he was still in the tree, still watching the road, still counting faces. 87 faces. Forever. The 99th Division held reunions. Tony attended when he could. Saw old guys from the Ardennes, shook hands, drank beer, talked about nothing important. Late in the evening at the 1973 reunion, a younger man approached. Maybe 40. Fit. Military bearing. "You're Castellano." "Yeah. I'm Lieutenant Michael Greco. I taught sniper school from 1968 to 1972. Your method, the extended static position, saved my ass twice in Vietnam." Tony didn't know what to say. His method. Like he'd invented something. Like it was a good thing. "You modify it," Tony asked. "Added radio communication to friendly positions. Better extraction protocol if mortars come. But the core concept, your concept, it works." "Not my concept, just common sense." Army didn't think so in 1944. Army thinks a lot of things. Greco wanted details. Every aspect, position selection, ammunition management, cold weather survival. How do you stay still that long? How do you handle the mental stress? How do you live with the kills? Tony answered what he could. Some questions didn't have answers. "You never got official credit," Greco said. "Don't need credit, just needed Germans dead and Americans alive. That's simple. That's simple." Greco shook his hand, looked Tony in the eye. "Thank you for what you did, for what you taught us." Tony nodded, didn't say you're welcome, didn't feel like thanks were appropriate. You don't thank someone for killing, even when the killing was necessary. A military historian tracked Tony down in 1989. Young professor from Columbia, researching Battle of the Bulge sniper operations, had found references in after-action reports, wanted the full story. Tony met him at a diner in Brooklyn. Let the historian buy him coffee. Listen to the pitch. "I'm writing about snipers who influence doctrine," the historian said. "Your case is unique. 87 confirmed kills from one position. You violated standing orders but ultimately changed those orders. That's historically significant." "Lots of guys change doctrine," Tony said. "Most of them died doing it. I got lucky." It wasn't just luck. The tactical analysis shows careful position selection, ammunition, discipline, threat assessment. You made decisions that kept you alive while maximizing effectiveness. I made decisions that killed 87 people. The historian paused. Realized this wasn't going the way he'd planned. They were enemy soldiers. They were somebody's sons, somebody's brothers, maybe somebody's fathers. The fact that they wore different uniforms doesn't change that. You don't think what you did was important. Tony looked out the diner window, watched people walking by, normal people doing normal things, the world he'd fought to protect. It was important, he finally said. It mattered. But that doesn't make it good, doesn't make it something to celebrate. War isn't about glory, it's about doing terrible things because the alternative is worse. But people should know your story. Why? So they can make me a hero? I'm not a hero. I'm a guy who killed 87 people and lived long enough to feel bad about it. That's not a story. That's just what war does to people. The historian tried a few more approaches. Tony declined them all. No interviews, no book, no story. Eventually the historian gave up, paid for the coffee, left. Tony sat in this diner a while longer, thinking about the kid who'd hunted pigeons on rooftops, who'd learned patience from his grandfather, who'd turned that patience into something lethal, wondering if that kid would recognize what he'd become, deciding probably not, deciding that was okay. February 3rd, 1997. Tony died at home. Heart attack, quick. He was sitting in a chair in his garage working on a neighbor's car. Teresa found him. He'd been gone maybe 10 minutes. 74 years old. 52 years after the tree. But part of him had never left Belgium. Part of him had stayed in that oak. Still watching, still counting. The funeral was small. Family, neighborhood friends, a few old guys from the 99th Division. Patrick O'Brien came down from Boston. 78 years old. Walking with a cane. He stood at the grave while they played taps. Watched them fold the flag. Handed it to Teresa. At the reception, after Tony's children approached O'Brien, Joseph Maria Anthony Jr., all middle-aged now, all carrying the question they'd never asked their father. What was he like, Joseph asked, in the war? O'Brien looked at them, these good people who'd known Tony as a quiet father, who'd never known the other Tony, the one in the tree. He was the bravest man I ever met, O'Brien said, and the calmest. When everything went to hell, he stayed focused, did what needed doing. He never talked about it, Maria said. Most guys don't. The ones who saw the worst, they keep it inside. Did he do anything important? O'Brien smiled, sad smile. He saved a lot of lives, maybe hundreds, changed how the army thought about tactics, but he never wanted recognition. Why not? Because he didn't do it for recognition. He did it because it needed doing. Anthony Jr. asked the real question. What exactly did he do? O'Brien told them. The oak tree, the logging road, 72 hours, 87 kills, the mortars, the cold, the notebook with all their names. When he finished, the children sat silent. We never knew, Maria finally said. He didn't want you to know. Wanted to be your father, not a war hero. Teresa spoke up. She'd been listening nearby. He had nightmares. Every December, he'd wake up shaking. Once he told me I killed a lot of people. Some deserved it, some were just kids. I don't know how to feel about that. O'Brien nodded, understood completely. That's the difference between soldiers and killers. Soldiers remember who they killed. The reception continued. People shared memories of Tony, the quiet mechanic, the patient father, the man who fixed their cars and never asked for much. Nobody mentioned the 87 Germans. That story died with Tony, the way he'd wanted. The logging road still exists, paved now, part of the regional highway system in eastern Belgium. Tourists drive it every day, families on vacation, trucks making deliveries. Normal traffic on a normal road. No monument marks what happened there. No historical plaque. No sign explaining that for 3 days in December 1944, this road became a killing ground. That 87 men died here. That one man in a tree changed military doctrine. Just a road through a forest. The oak tree stands too. 80 years of growth since 1944. Thicker now, older, still strong. The 3 branches that form Tony's platform are still there, 40 feet up. Perfect view of the road, 800 yards distant. Nobody knows this tree matters. Nobody remembers. It's just an oak. Home to birds and squirrels, part of the forest, part of the landscape. But for 72 hours, it was the deadliest position in the Ardennes. For 72 hours, a kid from Brooklyn sat in those branches and proved that sometimes stillness is more violent than movement. That sometimes refusing to move is the bravest thing you can do. The tree doesn't remember. Trees don't work that way. But if trees could remember this, one would remember cold, would remember the sound of rifle fire, would remember a young man lashed to its trunk, shaking from cold, and adrenaline counting faces he'd never forget, would remember the price of calculations, of trading one life for 87, of doing what needed doing even when it cost everything. The Army revised its sniper manual in March 1945. Buried in Section 7, Subsection 3, Paragraph 4, in defensive positions with confirmed friendly support and favorable terrain, snipers may maintain static positions beyond standard three-shot limitations, provided continuous reassessment of enemy counter-sniper threat and availability of timely extraction. Legal permission to do what Tony did. The revision didn't mention his name, didn't mention the Ardennes, didn't mention 87 kills in 72 hours. Just under specific conditions, static positions are authorized. That paragraph is still there. Modern snipers still learn it. Fort Benning still teaches it. Afghanistan veterans used it. Iraq veterans used it. Every generation of American snipers since 1945 has benefited from 3 days in December when a private first class decided doctrine was less important than mission. Tony never knew his method became official, never saw the updated manual. He'd moved on by then, become a civilian, become a father, become someone who fixed planes instead of killing people. But his innovation lived on, still lives on. Every sniper who maintains a position past 3 shots, who calculates that staying is worth the risk, who chooses mission over doctrine, is following Tony's example. Most don't know his name, don't know the story, just know the technique. Know that sometimes you stay. That's enough. That's what Tony would have wanted. Not glory, not recognition, just the knowledge that what he did mattered, that it saved lives, that it worked. The rest, the nightmares and the guilt in the 87 faces, that was the price. The cost of being good at something terrible. The weight you carry when you discover you're capable of things you never imagined. Tony carried it for 52 years. Carried it quietly. Carried it with dignity. Never complained. Never sought sympathy. Just lived with it. Because that's what soldiers do. The real ones. The ones who remember. And in the end, maybe that's the real story. Not 3 days of shooting, but 52 years of remembering. Not 87 kills, but 87 names written in a notebook. Not the violence, but the weight. That's how one sniper killed 87 Germans in 72 hours. Not through luck, not through superior equipment. Through understanding that sometimes the deadliest weapon isn't the one that moves fastest. It's the one that refuses to move at all. And through remembering, always remembering that every enemy killed was someone's son. That's what made Anthony Castellano not just a deadly sniper, but a man who could live with what he'd done. That's what made him human. That's what made him real. And that's what made his story worth telling, even though he never wanted it told.